we're going to get started. I want to be mindful and respectful of your time as we get closer to the holidays. It's 7 o'clock now. I'm Dr. Joshua Weaver. I'm the Assistant Superintendent at the school district. I'm going to do some introductions and then kick off our evening. Tonight's presentation is very collaborative. That whole group there up front will be presenting at some point. And I hope that as you listen tonight, that you take in a lot of the detail that we've put to some of this after our Imagine If evening. Totally recognize that some people still aren't going to be sold on this idea or some of the reasons why, but we do try to elaborate not only on the why, but some of the details to that throughout the evening. Before we get into the presentation, though, I do want to do some introductions. We have Dr. Howard, our high school principal tonight. Dr. Smith, our high school assistant principal. We have Deanna Christopher, high school counselor. Liz Dewart, another high school counselor. Jared Henson, a slew of teachers here. Jared Henshaw, Karen Sanita, Greg Mulatto, Tom Lilly, Dan Nemeth, Brian Lego, and Vincent Anastasi. We also have Tony Miller from the Career Center joining us this evening. There's a big shift to the Mercer County Career Center student experience, so he's going to elaborate a little bit about that this evening. I'd like to thank Dr. Finch, our superintendent, for being here this evening, and Dr. Connie Nichols, our board president, for joining us this evening as well. So our first slide is our why. I've been asked this a lot. Josh, why are we making a change? And somebody goes far in our Imagine If session saying, are you just doing this because you like to change things? I can tell you this has been a lot of work. It would have been much easier to stay and continue doing what we've always been doing. But when I started here, which it's hard for me to believe it's been 3 years now, two things happen when you start a new position in leadership in a school district. The first thing is people welcome you. And they're very excited that you're there, and they shake your hand, they want to introduce themselves, and they tell you a little bit about their children. That part's great. The very next thing they do once they have your ear is they like to tell you something that they have a concern about, or something that they think isn't working well, or something that's wrong. For me, 3 years ago, what I heard over and over again is when a student gets to the high school, there's not enough supports in place to help them. It doesn't matter whether they're a gifted student and high flyer, a middle-of-the-road student who just comes to school, does what they're supposed to do, is doing well, or a student who is struggling. There's never any time for a student to get any help. So we have a great staff, and our staff will come in early and they will stay late to help students. But it's not realistic today for students to stay after school because our students are really involved. We're like the perfect size, in my opinion, for a school district. We're big enough to offer a lot of opportunity, and we're still working on that as well. Or we're small enough that it requires a lot of our students to be involved to make our programs run. And that's what exists here. Later on, we'll get to a slide where we talk about the formation of a student committee and what that looks like and how to help us navigate this change. And we had 31 of the 34 students show up for the committee meeting last week for our first session. And I asked those students if anybody could meet after school, if their schedule was free. I think one student raised their hand. Every other student has a commitment after school here. That's one of the things that makes Grove City so awesome. They're involved in athletics, something with the arts, something with the theater, or maybe they work. Staying after school isn't a great option to get help. So one of our whys, we're really providing more time. How do we provide more time for students for things like enrichment activities, for intervention, for exploration, and collaboration? Through our research, we've looked at some different scheduling models because what I know is fixed is what time we have students and what time we have staff. I'm not going to adjust that too much. It's not plausible, even as a team or a directive from our board, to really change that structure much. So we have to look at the time that we have and the constraints we've been given, and how do we carve out more time to achieve some of these things. So throughout this evening's event, you're going to hear some of those details of what this could look like next school year to provide time for students for more enrichment, more intervention, more time for exploration, and more time for collaboration. So thank you so much for being here. At the end of tonight's session, we're not going to do a Q&A, really due to time. Sometimes those can go on for a very long time. So at the end, and you'll see it in the slide, you'll actually be sent a survey tomorrow. If you have not put your name and email out on the list, please do that. Denise Ferguson, who's my admin assistant, will compile that list tomorrow. It's a short survey. From that survey, we're going to produce frequently asked questions portion to our website, send that out through Blackboard Connect and through social media. And then we are going to have a listening session in February or March. But there does need to be a time for people to come, voice their concern, and ask individual questions if there's something we may not have answered, or something maybe you've thought of after the survey has been completed and the frequently asked questions have been posted. Without further ado, I'd like to turn it over for some more detail to tonight's presentation. Dr. Howard.
Through this process, if you attended the first evening of Imagine It, everybody received a survey, and you were provided the opportunity to give us any feedback, any concerns that you had after the first session. We also asked students for feedback, and so what I did with Dr. Weaver, we went through all of the concerns. We tried to list every single thing that anybody gave us. We did group some things together that we thought went together. And this is the list that came up. I'm not going to sit there and read the list to you, but as you look down it, I hope you see if you told us something that is up there. Through the presentation tonight, all of these items will be addressed. We feel that they'll be addressed, but when you leave here tonight, if you feel like, geez, I still have some more questions about that, as Dr. Weaver said, you have the opportunity to provide that feedback so we can give more explanation to you. Now, there were two areas, or those two bullets up here that really aren't addressed in the presentation. The first one is the very last one, which is gifted time. A lot of students and parents of gifted students said, oh, what's that mean for us or my child? There will still be a period of gifted. It's not going to be just during the lunch and learn time. Dr. Weaver and I both sat down with Mrs. Fry, who handles the gifted program at the high school, and we worked that out. They will have their period as they do now, and they will have the opportunity during the lunch and learn time. The other one that came up was college courses, and if we flip to the next slide, I can maybe explain that a little bit better. If you look at the schedule, the GC day, or the two options, or the alternating days, there's still 4 periods. Kids still take 8 classes. They take 8 classes now. They have 8 periods. They have 8 periods next year. That's not changing. What happens is they just have 4 classes per day. Right now, if a student takes a college class, for every college class they take, we take 2 periods out of their school day so that they have time to travel to the college, to take the course, whether that's at Grove City, Slippery Rock, or Westminster. If you look at this, let's say you have a child that takes a college class at the end of the day. Then, we would not schedule you period 4 or period 8. So no matter what the day would be, whether it's G day or C day, you don't have class at the end of the day, so you can attend the college. If you take a morning class, then we would do the same thing with the schedule. You wouldn't have a 1 or a 5. And right now, we have kids going at all times during the day. We have kids that go at the beginning of the day. I have kids that go at the end of the day. I have kids that go in the very middle of the day. We can make that work as an easy accommodation. So right now, if the student takes a college course, they schedule 6 periods. If they take a college course next year, they schedule 6 periods. And you'll look down through the schedule. Every class will meet for 80 minutes. After the first 2 periods, they will go back to what we're calling Eagle Time. And this was the very first task that we gave our student committee. We asked them what they would like to call the middle of the time day, or the homeroom period. And Eagle Time was suggested, so that is what we are calling it. And after that is when they have their lunch and learn, which is a combined lunch and whatever the student decides to do during the period. And that's 75 minutes. That was something else that we took back from the first Imagine It session. We had a lot of feedback, like 90 minutes. It just sounds way too long. I don't know what my child would do for 90 minutes. We went back and talked about it, and we agreed, and we shortened that to 75 minutes.
Good evening, everyone. Just to talk to you a little bit about lunch and learn structure the first week. We would use that time really just to indoctrinate the students. They would go to their Eagle Time, teachers that they would be assigned to, and then we would just roll out the school year. We would explain expectations that we have for lunch and learn. Typically during the first week of school, also at the end of the week under our existing schedule, what we normally do is we meet with each class at the end of the week and kind of go over our building procedures, policies that we're mandated to go over, those types of things. And to be honest with you, it's about a 45-minute block, and it's not enough time. I feel that I rushed through it with the kids. It's just not enough time to hit that. I think this would give us a little bit more time to appropriately get into the school year, indoctrinate the kids into the school year, take good quality time to introduce building procedures, whether they be emergency procedures or just normal procedures that we do on a daily basis, as well as our expectations for our lunch and learn. And then Mr. Henshaw's going to talk a little bit about our real-time accountability system that we'll have so that we know where all the kids are during lunch and learn.
So after the first week, and the students are ready to begin with the lunch and learn, how it would work is each kid will have a QR code. And so they would come into equal time, and during that 10-minute period, they would get out their QR code, and they would pull out their phone or use the class iPad to scan it, and then it would automatically fill in with their name. Each code will be designated to a kid, and then they will choose from a list of choices for where they would be going. At the end of the equal time, they would then go to the area they went. It's a real-time list that's updated live. At any point in time can be searched. So if you came in to find your kid and you needed to get them, we could just do a Control F on the spreadsheet and instantly find the last location they were at. Say they went to Mr. Lego's class to do a quiz, and 30 minutes into it, they're done, and they're ready to move somewhere else. They can then bring up a QR code, rescan, update it with where they are heading to at that point. And at the end of it, I'll give you guys a chance to see how that'll look. Students also during the equal time some will be selected by name and need. Some will, I'm the equal time teacher, I've been notified that Zoe, you are to go to Lego for a quiz. I will tell you, Zoe, you're going to Lego. You'll bring up a QR code and that's where you're headed. And so during that 10-minute period will be a time to get organized with where the students will be going to for the lunch and learn.
And this is a nice segue talking about the structures that we'll have in place, building structures, as far as having kids have specific areas where they should go. There'll be support areas, obviously there'll be areas that they report to eat lunch. We'll have intramurals set up as well as quiet spaces for them. The next slide really depicts, it gives you a nice visual of the different types of things that can occur during this time. You can just look up at the top left, that's Mr. Mortakis, our industrial technology teacher, along with Mr. Henshaw, working on a long-range project with kids. Kids may have a project in one of the shops that they're working on. They would be able to sign out, go to the shop areas and continue the project. You can see in the middle slide intramurals. Obviously our music, our arts would have additional opportunities to rehearsal time, kids just wanting to play and practice as well. Time for collaboration. Dr. Weaver alluded to this as far as one of our big reasons why. Collaboration is a key 21st century skill, and providing time for kids to do that outside the classroom we feel is critical. And also I think our next slide shows Mr. Logan here in the top right providing support. Again, not to applaud Mr. Henshaw, but this student would be working in his class. There's a lot of editing that takes place. Project-based class there, kids would have time to go and do that. You see the students rehearsing as well. Our library would be open as a resource for students, as kind of a designated area for them to go to as well, to access, to collaborate, to do research, etc. And also it would give us additional time to open our school store. And for those kids to have that learning experience, our life school students run the school store and also open it to the other kids that are able to come and access the store at that time. So those are some things that we would be able to implement during this lunch and learn time.
We started brainstorming. We started last year brainstorming different things that we could use the time for in the middle of the day. I've asked students, I've asked teachers, and this list continues to grow. I get emails from students each week. What about this? I'm like, put it on the list. Nothing's impossible. You can read down through the list, different opportunities, and a lot of these are opportunities we just cannot offer now. We don't have the ability to do so. We can't find that common time with students. If you look down through the list, one thing we hear a lot is that maybe SAT preparation. When can we do that for our students so we don't have to go outside of the district to look for that? Something we could do during that time. Another one on the list is robotics, and I know this afternoon we were meeting with Grove City College in the robotics club at the college. A professor from the college, Dr. Nichols, was there, and we have great things that we can start this year, but the problem we had was finding the common time for the college students to come and work with our high school students. And looking ahead to next year, we all, I think, agree that would be a great time to do that. It's a great time for us to collaborate with others outside of the school to provide opportunities for our students that we can't do right now. Good time bringing college representatives. I said this the last time we met. We bring college representatives in every week. We bring people from the armed forces. We bring people from career technical school. A lot of kids don't want to miss class to go and meet with the representative. This is another time that we would doing is we're keeping the instructional time for instructional time and not pulling kids at other times of the day for assemblies, for representatives, time to collaborate. We could bring people in from the community to talk about different professions, things of that nature. So this list continues to grow. I don't want to say like on the first day of school, am I going to have every single one of this set up? No. But that's what we're going to be working towards throughout the year, and continue to talk to the students about what are some things that they'd like to see that we don't do now.
So what does it look like to be in a class for 80 minutes, right? So a lot of you, just like I was in my high school experience, spent time in a 40, 41, 42-minute class. I also have had the opportunity for 6 years to teach in this type of structure where we had some rotating blocks and different lengths of class up to 120 minutes, and also had a common community time for students. So I've had this structure in place, and also...
Yeah, I've also taught 9 years prior in a block schedule with from a 90-minute period all the way up to a 120-minute period. And the people think of a block schedule, they think of we're going to take today's lesson, Monday's lesson, and Tuesday's lessons and mesh them together to cover the content. It actually really doesn't work that way. Within your lessons, you build in time chunking the materials that you're presenting. When I taught in block, when I co-taught in Algebra 1 class, our class structure was broken up into 10 to 15-minute chunks of time, where we would introduce the content, reinforce the content, a little drill and practice, and in those times, we could retouch with the students and make sure we touched with every student there, that see if they were getting the problems that we were addressing in class, the curriculum that we were trying to address there. And if a kid was getting it, great, we're good, we're moving on. But if a kid wasn't, we could sit there and spend that extra 2 minutes that reinforces that time with them, and to make sure they master that content before just, okay, we got to cover this content and move on. So the content was covered in depth versus, all right, I have to move on to the next slide thing.
So, you know, I teach foreign language, and so this is a dream come true in my world, because you know, I can take 15, 20 minutes where I'm introducing a new vocabulary or grammatical concept, then take and do some think, pair, share, do a little bit of a written activity where I'm controlling the resources that the students are able to use, you know, in dictionaries and online dictionaries, things like that, instead of sending them out into the world where I have no control over what they're looking up, and I'm able to help them with good resources. Then we come back together, we share out what we wrote or what we learned, we talk, we speak about the culture of it. And what it might have taken me 3 days to cover in a typical 40-minute period, I can usually bring in by introducing the material and working it in so many different ways while I have the captive audience and able to have the students manipulate the same information in multiple ways, right? So then when you come back, when you see the student 2 days later, it's taken a deeper meaning for them, because they remember some, you know, in no perfect world do they remember absolutely everything from day to day and then 2 days later, but they remember it in a different way. I always find that to be true. And so, you know, once again, not feeling like I'm doubling lessons, but because I don't have to go back and hit that review moment where I'm recapturing, because some students do retain better than others. But that chunking up of time is the key to all of this working, because you know, nobody wants to sit and listen to an 80-minute lecture. I surely don't. I don't want to give an 80-minute lecture. I don't think any of our faculty do. So this is just a way to relook at our teaching.
You'll notice there a bulleted list of the ways that we believe it would improve our students' experience. I'm not going to touch on all of them. I'll let you read them up there for a little bit of time, but I'd like to highlight a couple of them that are really important to me. I'm looking forward to the collaborative piece. From a student perspective and from a teacher perspective, There's nothing more frustrating for me than being able to dive into a lesson, we'll do guided practice, so I'll give the students time to do independent practice, and then we'll do a lab where we're trying to reinforce those skills. The students are collaborative, and then the bell rings. And the next day, I'm trying to recapture the magic that was happening, and it could happen again, but it's difficult. I don't want to interrupt that collaborative time where the students are using each other to learn. So that's something I'm really looking forward to seeing. I'm also looking forward to the opportunities Lunch and Learn lends itself towards teacher collaboration. Finding people within my own department is a mild struggle. Finding someone outside of my department to collaborate is almost impossible with the current schedule. Something that's happening right now, I want to brag on a few of our teachers, they are making ornaments. And it is a combined effort between the art department, with the tech department, with a wood shop. You've got some of the science teachers are in on this, trying to work this out with a whole bunch of different periods to help the kids complete a project. When it would be amazing to look at all of these students and say, hey, come down to this one room during Lunch and Learn. Let's show you these different pieces from 4 or 5 different teachers. I want to see that happen. I mean, I love my department, don't get me wrong. I want to work with people outside of my department. So that's something I'm really looking forward to, is that collaborative piece. Another thing that some of the students have expressed, and a lot of the teachers have expressed, is a slower paced day. I'm looking forward to 4 periods a day instead of 8. That is just easier for me to process, where I can focus on less classes and deliver better instruction to your students. There's less for me to focus on, especially when we might have a 2-hour delay or something like that. And we've got 20 minutes with your kids. That day flies. I'm really looking forward to something, and like I said, I think the students will appreciate as well, something that's a little slower paced.
And so to echo that too, looking at the student side of things, I think we really have to think about this idea that Dr. Weaver was in one of my classes a couple of weeks ago, and the students expressed that they had it was a hard time for them at night when they look ahead to the next day thinking of, okay, I have 8 classes, what do I need to do here, what do I need to do here, what do I need to do here? So for them, they have in their minds a slower paced day where now they say, all right, I have 4 classes, how can I get ready for those 4 classes? How can I be the best student possible in those 4 classes? And the same thing what he's saying there is that as teachers, you know, we're sitting here like trying to go all over the place, but we have to feel for the students too that are going through that struggle the same. So to take this schedule now where they only have to prepare for those 4 classes the next day, I believe that they will be able to come to class a lot more prepared. And this idea that they have a day in between too. So if we finish something and then there's still a little bit of concern there that they don't understand it, they still have that extra time to make sure that they can be fully prepared whenever they meet again for that class. The one big one up there for me that I absolutely love is this idea, the second to last bullet point there, where students are going to self-advocate. We are now trying to put more of the onus of education and controlling education onto the students themselves, and it gets to that idea of the Lunch and Learn period that if you don't understand something, you have the avenue to reach out. You have the ability to go and find somebody else, or to find a student or a teacher potentially that could help you with that. And looking down the road too, as a high school, we have to begin thinking of ourselves as how do we get kids college and career ready? And I just think about college, you know, the college experience, that you have class on Monday, you have class on Wednesday. If you leave lecture on Monday and you still don't really understand, it's on you to go out and find that college professor and say, I need help, right? I need to go and find office hours. I need to find out when that is, and I need to know how I can approach that person to make sure that I'm prepared on that Wednesday. And I feel like this really simulates that for our kids, and I think we're giving them skills that they can take with them now to the next level of saying, I'm owning my education. How do I make sure I'm the best student, I'm the most prepared student for that next day's class?
One comment that we saw a lot after the Imaginative, a big one was band. And I don't know if talking about the Lunch and Learn time and saying that we had the opportunity if students wanted to do lessons or learn a different instrument, we could do that. We can do that, but we are still going to have band. Band is still going to be a class of the day. That's not going anywhere. But what we can do, we can extend past that. there are students that would spend more time working on their music instrument or working in a small ensemble if they had the time to do so. Mr. Habarka may not be here all day, but we do have other music teachers that can be here for that part. Mr. Habarka will be here doing band. Okay, I just want to make sure everybody knows that. The other one was wellness. What does 80 minutes of gym look like? And I think that came more from students than it did the parents. We're still having wellness. Some days there might be 80 minutes of activities, and maybe you're switching between activities. Right now, you know, the students are here. We get to choose between 3 activities every day when you go into wellness. It might be something like that, but there are also other areas that we need to cover as part of our curriculum, and we're going to do it during that 80 minutes. So maybe one day you'll have 40 minutes of physical fitness, and then depending on the need of the students, you might go take your driver's ed class. You can have first aid and safety, or you can have the health component. So that's how we will break that up. We used to do online driver's ed, and we just think it's more valuable to have driver's ed with an actual teacher where kids can have questions. So that will be built into wellness in the 80 minutes.
Okay, so one of the things that a lot of people are worried about, including teachers, is how are we going to be ready to do this? We obviously have a few teachers that you heard from already that are doing or have done block scheduling and 80-minute classes. We're going to lean on them a lot. I think that whatever class is going to look like, it depends on the teacher. You know, I have 2 AP classes and an Algebra 1. Those won't look the same. I'm not going to lecture for 80 minutes, but we've gotten some literature. We've looked into some research. I personally have gone to Kiski down where, and we've seen it. I've seen Lunch and Learn. I've seen classes. I've seen what's going on. I'm a control kind of person, like a lot of people might be, and Lunch and Learn was very scary. But then when you look at it, like I went to the library, there was 200 kids in there, and they were all doing, like, they were working. It wasn't, I went to the gym, and they had a 3-on-3 basketball tournament during school, while other kids, like I had an AP stats teacher, it was like kids coming and making up quizzes and asking questions. It opens up a lot of that, so we're learning by going and seeing. We talk to the algebra teachers, they share students between them, so if there was 2 or 3 algebra teachers, you might have this one or this one, and you change back and forth. You get a lot of opportunities to interact with not just, let's say you don't learn so well from one teacher, you might be able to go see a different one during that Lunch and Learn time and find something different. They've given us some packets, some ideas. We're working on putting together lesson plans for the first week for next year so that we can take a look at them, and people that have done it before go, this might work, this might not, give us ideas on that kind of stuff as well. And being an AP teacher, I'm big on pacing guides. I really, you know, I don't aspire to be a college professor, but knowing every day I will have 80 minutes and it won't be interrupted by assemblies or field trip. Like, I mean, field trips obviously will happen, but like, I don't worry like we're gonna have this and that and this. I have 80 minutes every day. I almost could say, here's what we're doing for the entire year. My test will be on, like, and it won't change. And I'll be able to say, we'll be here on this day and here on this day. You're gonna be gone for a week. We'll be here, here, and here. Here are the things I need you to do. I like that kind of structure. And student feedback, obviously we're gonna talk to different kids, and you know, they're gonna go through the committees you'll hear about in a little bit, and here's how we're doing it. But you know, I plan on, I talked to Dr. Howard about maybe going down to Kissimmee and just spending the whole day there and just taking notes and talking and going to math classes. How can that help my department? How can I go into other departments and help them as well? So there's a lot of stuff that, you know, we have to do, but it's an exciting time. It is.
We've talked a little bit about our student committee there in the opening. We obviously want students who are going to be sort of customers of this to have some input in this design and help out in the actual transformation into the new program. So we put together a Google form, sent it out from every student from 9 through 12, and I was pleasantly surprised. We had 34 students volunteer for the committee. I had a student during one of the sessions, might have actually 6, in Mr. Nemit's class when I was in there speaking, came up to me and said, Dr. Weaver, I volunteer for stuff and I don't get selected. I said, well, if 100 students volunteer to serve on these committees, we'll break groups into subcommittees. Everybody will have a spot. And that's what we've decided to do. We decided to take our 34 students. We sent out another survey, and Dr. Howard's going to elaborate a little bit of what that'll look like. We're going to break them into subcommittees to help design different parts of what this could look like for next school year. One of which I believe hopefully includes a trip down Kiski area to see a student experience from another student. Dr. Kara, do you want to elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. After we met with the 34 students, which was just last week, I sent out another survey to them and asked them simple things. First of all, when are they free? When can I get them together? That is our hardest part right now. After school is out, finding common lunchtime, common study hall period, that's what we're trying to do. But I also asked the students, what would you like to be a part of in looking at this? Students could pick one thing, they could pick more than one. And most of the kids would like to have some say, like I still said to them, what are you still afraid of? What are you still uncertain of? They said things like that. Different parts of the curriculum that they'd like to see. What are some things they'd like to see offered? And I think they're worried, like, am I going to have more homework, that kind of stuff. Our teacher's going to just stand up and talk for 80 minutes. So we're going to sort of break them into different groups by the feedback that they're giving to me. I also have students who have provided some feedback that aren't on the committee that have sent me emails, and even though they're not on the committee, I'm putting that information in so that the students can look at that and have a voice in this as well.
For inclement weather, we currently have, for our delays, we currently have 4 delay schedules, day 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the class periods are either directly or indirectly impacted, as Mr. Lilly alluded to, talking about 20-minute periods. So it's difficult to do a lot in 20 minutes. So with the delay schedule, for this type of schedule, all the classes would meet. They'd all be 51 minutes each, okay? There's still lunch and learn will remain intact. We would have to bump it back a little bit later into the day because of the delay, but it'd still be 75 minutes. So we look at the benefits there that really the kids are still getting the lunch and learn, all the classes meet, plus the time is not 20 minutes and it's extended as well there. If a day is canceled, the day is never missed. And what we mean by that, if G Day was the day that was canceled, the next day that the students would come in the building would be G Day. We don't skip G Day. So the very next day they would come in would be the next day we would use it. So the example here, if we canceled on Monday, that was a G Day, and G Day is pushed to Tuesday or the next day that we're in session. So that day would never be missed. And again, the benefits here, equitable time, even if we have a delay. We talk about we'll never miss a day because we go to the next day there. And the resource availability, they still have availability to lunch and learn.
So just like the students are concerned about, an 80-minute lecture, they're also been concerned about double the homework. And that's the first thing to put out there is that, a twice as long class does not mean double the homework. The homework that we will be doing, and as my colleagues are going to be talking about, will, be pointed for that lesson for that day, but it does not mean double. That's the biggest thing to put out there, I think, to kind of squash the student concerns about that.
I am a science teacher. I've talked with a lot of the math department. We're still going to give homework, especially depending on the class. I know that your son or daughter may be involved in a higher level class or maybe even an AP class. Don't worry, Mom and Dad, we will still supply them with homework. But something that Lego and I were talking about, since we do teach AP Science and AP Math courses, having them in class for that extended period of time allows us and affords us the opportunity to go a little bit deeper. Whereas we may have assigned you those types of problems, we might be able to tackle a few more of them in class. So I don't need to send you home with as much repetition or something him and I were talking about. We were discussing sending students home, making a cognitive effort of sending students home to reinforce certain concepts. And I can do that with 4 or 5 problems. I don't need to give you 20. So that is something that we were talking about. Will it go away? No. But I know that me personally, I'm going to make a more concerted effort to make sure that the problems that I give or what I want to reinforce is more targeted and more specific.
Yeah, to parlay on what Tom said, usually in a 40-minute class, you have enough time to present a concept, do an example. We give classroom, then I send them home with like skill sets instead of, well, I got home and I got the learn problems and I know what to do. Like, I hear that all the time when kids walk into class. I didn't know who to ask because nobody at home can help me. Well, if we do that stuff in class and go home and say, listen, I want you to do these 10 problems because it's just skill to, math needs a little bit of repetition. Some people can't get a concept after one problem. Some can, but not everybody. I want to use that time to develop and go deep and just say, listen, do these 10 problems at home or do these, whatever it is, but it's not detailed, deep problems. That's what's being done in the classroom when we have the time. When you have other people there to bounce ideas off of. And like I said before, like AP classes versus algebra can look a little bit different. How much can we cover with each one? We don't, that's still a mystery. But yeah, I'm still going to homework, but it won't be I don't think it'll be as much because we'll be covering it deeper in class.
I'll echo that as well from the English side of things, on the reading and the writing side. On the reading side, I don't foresee any of my colleagues adding twice as many novels to their courses right now. It's just not realistic. Hard enough as if we have, so I don't see that changing in terms of what they're reading. I actually see there being more time in class. Part of that chunking could be doing some of that reading, so I can see that dropping to an extent. The writing part is what interests me the most because I want authentic examples of student writing, and as it is right now, I can't guarantee that. In fact, I've had evidence in the past 2 years of plenty of inauthentic writing. Plagiarism, to put it in kind of terms, if you will. So being able to work with them in class on that and getting things started, clarifying all the confusion that might lead them to want to try to cheat or use plagiarism, squash that up front, that's more beneficial for me on the AP level down to my more common courses to be able to work with them in class. Then when I'm sitting at home, they're dealing with more revision opportunities, extension opportunities, remediation. I've already nailed, you're really struggling with your run-ons, so that's your baby for tonight, okay? Go back through what we did in class and work on that. So I can see it being individualized, more authentic. I don't see it being just a more authentic, more efficient use of homework, at least in the English department.
And I think it also gets back to, that's the glorious part about this schedule, is that the absolute nightmare is when you get home and you have 10 questions and you can't even do the first one. And then you're like totally stuck and you're trying to email the teacher, and I think that's the expectation now is, well, you have Google Classroom, right? Or you have email, so just email them, right? But it just doesn't work like that. But in this schedule, now, if you're stuck on question 1, you have lunch and learn the next day just to say, hey, can I pop in for 15 minutes and can we work through some of these? So instead of a student having to sit there and just not be able to, up against the wall, they can't get a concept or they can't get a skill, now they have that next day that they could potentially come in, work with the teacher for 15 minutes, get it done, and it's there, it's it, right? And so that, it really is such a great thing. But now, like if we would ask ourselves to do that now, that time just isn't built in. And it comes to us like, I'm trying to grab kids out of lunch, they're trying to come up to mine during lunch, we're trying to match up planning periods with study halls, and it just doesn't work. It's not there. But it's just so easy now with the system that we're going to have in place that if a student doesn't understand the concept, it's just innate. They come and they'll figure it out. And instead of them beating their head against the wall at home, we actually have that time during the day to help kids, and that's the best part.
We are. We're excited by the fact that we think not only will it help limit student stress, because we know that seems just to escalate every year with students, we think it'll alleviate a lot of stress for you at home. You're not sitting there crying tears with your son or daughter, we can't do the integral of the second limit of the first derivative. Like some of you would look at that and be like, I'm pretty sure that's French. These are things you don't have to worry about when they can go in the next day and say, Lego, what were you talking about? So that's something we're looking forward to.
And this goes back to a few of the concepts from the previous slides about self-advocacy. Our students, in essence, have a 75-minute study hall if they needed it per day. They can go to one of those quiet spaces and they can take the time, or they can go, to that teacher. Often some of even the students who come to me, they may have a resource teacher or something. They say, hey, can I take my test somewhere else? I say, who are you going to, I teach French. Who are you going to ask if you really have a question? Stay here and take it with me. You could, but stay here and take it with me. And they always go, oh yeah, that's probably a good idea, right? So come and come and see me when you have a problem with what's going on. So it's big on the self-advocacy, but we don't expect our students to be able to self-advocate just because we told them to. This is going to be a learning experience, and it's going to be a life skill that they're all going to learn. So Dr. Smith had talked a little bit at the beginning about that first week of our Lunch and Learn. When they're in their Eagle time, they're going to be taught a few things about what that looks like to take ownership of your education. Not just, hey, you own it, go, bye, see ya, and we expect by week 3 you're perfect. So they'll be able to take the little life lessons away, and their Eagle Time teacher can check in with them and be like, hey, you checked out for that quiz or whatever, did you make that up, how'd it go? Take on some sort of role and be able to look, help our kids out when they need it, and hopefully they can look at their Eagle Time teacher and be able to say, I'm not sure where to go for help.
One thing that I thought about when I was doing my other presentation was down at observing another school. Number one is I talked to teachers. They didn't know me. I didn't really know them. There wasn't anybody around. And I said, 80 minutes. They're like, we love it. We'd never give it back. And we were the kind of group that was like, I don't want to do this. This is great. Like they said they would not give the 8 minutes back for a minute. 2, the other thing I thought about is I asked students. I said, what do you think? And it was like a normal student. Like we weren't sure, but now it's awesome. I go home. I don't understand my homework. I have the whole next day. I come in during my teacher's lunch. I was in a calc room. She didn't even tell people to come. There's 25 kids that showed up, and they were like doing homework together and working on stuff. We're not going to double the class. The other thing too is they're going to have 4 classes of homework that night anyway instead of 8. I mean, I have a 9th grader, and I can't help him with honors bio. Like it's frustrating for me. Like he can't, go see your teacher. Well, we have to get there at 6:30 in the morning to talk. Like it's not possible. We can't get him to school at 6:30 in the morning to go see his teachers. So that was the other thing. Today, just as an example, like I had a student that missed, we had a test. They were absent yesterday. They come in today. I need you to take your test. Now you're going to miss what I'm doing in class. It's coming during your lunch and learn, take your test. The next day you're in class, you're there. You didn't miss it. That's a frequent occurrence. Kids miss. They have to make up the test. They miss the next day. Like essentially miss the next lecture. Or class or concepts, and then they're 2 days behind because they missed 1 day of school. And that's just, it's silly. But that's what we're at. I mean, this is something that could benefit that as well.
So pictures of our Career Center students that are attending the Career Center this year. And I'd like to introduce Mr. Miller to you. So gracious to join us this evening. Work with Mr. Miller. He was the principal at the Career Center, now he's the director. And I don't want to embarrass him. He's really a wonderful man, a wonderful educator. He even said we've worked through some difficult situations together, and they were successful. So I really value him as a colleague in his role at the Career Center. In his advocacy for our kids. And I just want to let all of you know that he's a really, really quality man. So these are kids that are up at the shops now that exist there. Some of you may recognize them. And how the Career Center will work is that, as it was already presented to you, we'll have a G day and a C day. So we're going to send, not all the Career Center kids will go at once. We'll split them into the G day and C day. So some will go on G day, some will go on C day. So they'll go opposite of each other. Mrs. Christopher is going to talk to you a little bit about the benefits of the structure, going through the structure, some details, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Miller if he wants to add anything there. We can go ahead and listen to his comments.
So in terms of the structure for Career Center students, what they'll get here is their 4 classes on the day that they're here, but they will also get the opportunity to experience Lunch and Learn for whatever they need. They will have enrichment opportunities that they may not have had before. Most importantly, they will have access to help and intervention for things, which quite honestly, I think has been difficult for them to find. They have to get here early in the morning, or they have to come back from the Career Center and stay late to get the help that they need. So, Lunch and Learn will provide that for them. Up at the Career Center, they will get full days. So we actually took a group of students there a few weeks ago prior to Thanksgiving, 9th and 10th grade students, and we were able to talk to some of the shop teachers, and we told them about the new schedule. We told them that our students were going to be there full days, and they said, wow, that's so great, because now we have a full day. They can earn more hours toward their shop. But as they get older, especially their senior year, now we can provide them with those work experience. We can provide them with those co-op experiences, because it's just easier and a student is more marketable when they have a full day to work with as opposed to half days that they do now.
Yeah, we see it as a benefit, and for our staff, they're already teaching 2.5 hours a day with our students, so they're masters of this block scheduling because they're doing it. And we're a one-room schoolhouse. We have 3 grades of instruction happening all at one time. Our teachers really do juggle that on a daily basis because it's competency-based. The students coming in, working on the skills they need to work on. Sometimes that project can last 2-3 days. We have some live work projects that are really big jobs for our kids. So having that time to stay there all day long, not have to move things around and out of the shop from morning and afternoon, those are really good opportunities for our students. In terms of collaboration with Grove City, over the years, the kind of issues that we've had with students, and not just here but other schools, are as students not passing, they need to be held back for remediation. Maybe a student doesn't have enough credits to come to our school because they haven't been successful in their grades in 9th and 10th grade. This, again, I think will help that opportunity, get students remediated, get them the credits that they need so that they can come and take advantage of the opportunities at the Career Center. We spent time, I applaud Raylyn and Dr. Weaver for contacting us back in May of last year to start thinking forward about this change. We went to Northern Westmoreland and toured their school, Dervotech, which is very similar to ours, they're a part-time career center. And they're operating just like we do, but they have one school, Kiski, that is part-time. It's been a very positive opportunity for them. It's actually opened up more opportunities for the students because they have students who are able to get on the path and come to the Career Center. So it's been very positive. We think that's something that could possibly happen in this venture. So again, our teachers understand it. We are the one-room schoolhouse. A lot of our projects last over a couple days anyway, so it really is a good fit, we think, for our building.
Thank you.
Yeah. You got it. Thank you.
As far as safety and security, what that looks like, we have student accountability. Mr. Henshaw is going to go into great detail with you about that. We talked about self-advocacy, kids advocating for themselves, teaching them those skills. Some kids need a little bit more help than others. Some students need to be pointed in a direction by an adult. We will have structures in place that do that support those kids, to help them get to be where they're going to be. Just a term that's come out, just so that we're on the same page, use this term by name or need. And what that means is that a teacher can pull a student for enrichment or intervention by name or by need. So if I'm in Mr. Lego's Algebra 1 class and I need some assistance, he can pull me for me to go to his class during lunch and learn, okay? Now, the student's made aware of that, but maybe the student doesn't make it down to Mr. Lego. We will have structures in place to make sure that that student gets to their interventions, okay? And I think, see, some of you kind of read in between the lines there. They're not necessarily punitive, but they're gonna be a structure in place to make sure that we do get the student so they can't get their intervention. The building's not wide open. This isn't an open campus, okay? It's not gonna be a free-for-all. If there's anybody worried about that more than anybody, it's me, okay? So this isn't gonna be a free-for-all here. We will teach these kids to advocate for themselves. We want them to teach them that skill. We want them to fall and stumble through that process a little bit. We want to be supportive through that process, but it's just not going to be an open building here. Students won't leave for lunch. When we met with the kids, that was a big question. Will you allowed to leave? No, you're not. You'll have plenty of time to eat lunch, but you're here for enrichment, intervention, picking those areas that you would enjoy exploring, those types of things. From a safety standpoint, very, very important. We all know how important this is. We know the investment that the school district has recently made in our safety and security here. We will have regular drills, procedures when they're in the classroom. When we're in a classroom and the fire alarm goes off, or we practice lockdowns, those types of drills will still occur. Those will occur as normal, traditional Plan 1 in class. the big thing that we had to think through a little bit, what if we're in lunch and learn? And, you know, we have 650 kids in all kind of different pockets of the building. How does that work in the case of emergency? We will have muster stations. The kids will know what their muster station is, who they're to report to, where they report to in a time of an emergency, okay? In a specific area of the building, and who that adult will be if they're in lunch and learn. So we will have that organized as planned out. I also think we don't think emergencies happen. We only think they happen when we're in class. They can happen when we're exchanging classes. They can happen during lunchtime. So we need to be prepared for that. So that last bullet really addresses that.
In a little bit here, we're going to actually let all of you, we'll do a mock equal time, we'll let you try out how this will look with the student accountability, and you'll be able to see it live, updating where you would choose to go. And so at any point in time, we're going to be able to go into to see where that student is. So that student may put down they went to Mr. Haggert's room. We will then look at the list, be able to find their name instantly, and go there and see that they are there. The muster station plan, every QR code will have these embedded into it so that if they were to forget what is their muster station, they can pull it out, it's with them always. They can even have a picture of it on their phone because their phones are always with them. And we're going to, in just a little bit, we're going to show you, instead of going more depth, but we're going to actually let you do it so you get to see it hands-on.
All right, before we conclude, I do want to explain a few follow-up pieces for tonight's event. But before we do that, I really want to thank our staff. I want to give them a little round of applause. All the staff that is here tonight not only has met at hours at this point in the development of this presentation, including Mr. Ranker, who I missed on my list twice. He's not on a slide. But in the development, not only of the presentation, but some of the discussions around this. I mean, it's happening across the entire building, but this has been a group, some of which have volunteered, some of which have been asked to participate, that has spent a lot of time above and beyond. And then they give up an evening with their families to be here tonight to really elaborate on some of this. We bring, I think, a great deal of expertise for people who have had experience in this, to some who haven't, who are nervous about it, but a big kudos to them for giving up this time tonight to come out and present to our community. Before we wrap up as well, I want to explain that I'm not naive enough to think that everybody believes this is a good idea. It's change. And there's a saying that the only person who likes change is a wet baby, and I recognize that. But I wholeheartedly believe this is a change in the right direction. This is not going to be perfect, without a doubt. It's not going to be the ideal situation for every single child, but I do think it improves the situation for every single child. The Mercer County Career Center student is a wonderful example of, it took 52 students, I believe, right now in this building, that, in my opinion, in talking with Tony and the folks at Westmoreland County, will have a significantly better experience, not only here, but also at the Career Center. So I think across the board, this will improve the student experience. And I stand by the fact that I'm the assistant superintendent here, but I'm the dad of a 10-year-old little girl who's in 5th grade. And every decision I make in this job, I do through the lens of being a father first, rather than an assistant superintendent. And I hope when my daughter gets to high school, that there's a system in place like this. Because I wholeheartedly believe this is a way to provide high school students far more support than they've ever had at the high school level. So in closing, tomorrow morning, as I said earlier, Denise Ferguson, who's my admin assistant, will send you a survey, a little explanation. I think it's 4 or 5 questions. We developed it earlier this week. And it's really around what you think is going to work well, what are your concerns, what questions do you have. Instead of doing a Q&A tonight, because I recognize that could take this meeting from about 8 or 8:05 to 9:30 very easily, we're going to post all the questions that you have in the survey in a frequently asked questions section. That'll be on our website. It'll go out through Blackboard Connect with a little explanation and letter attached to it, and then we'll post it on our social media avenues as well. And I would expect to see that probably early January. And we're going to try to put in writing every question or concern that you may have so that gets answered. And I still recognize there should be a time for question and answer. So we've decided on, as a team, that we think it'd be great to have a listening session or a Q&A session sometime in probably late February, early March, where we won't present, it won't be so structured. It'll literally be something like this, and we'll probably have a panel of folks, and we can just answer and field any questions or concerns that you may have. So those are some next steps for us in terms of this process. I look forward to collaborating with you through this. We had our Imagine If evening. At the end of that night, I offered up to anybody there to email me, call me, set up time. We'll go to breakfast, we'll have lunch. I do like to eat. You know, we come to my office and we'll meet and we'll talk about it. No one has yet to take me up on that offer, but I believe maybe from the first session tonight, a couple people may. So that offer's on the table again. By all means, I'm very accessible and would really enjoy engaging like that. Before we totally close tonight, and I'll let you go home, turn it over to Mr. Henshaw. Mr. Henshaw is like an absolute wizard with technology. Has developed something using Google, which we already have. We moved to Google, I think it's been there 2 years now. Every student has an email account, access to the G Suite, and through some of his innovation, I jokingly said, I don't even know if he's going to be a Grove City teacher in a couple of years, because I think other districts may want to use this, even if they don't have a schedule that's structured this way. So we turn over to Mr. Henshaw to wrap up tonight.
So what you're seeing on the screen is a QR code. If you have Snapchat, if your kid has Snapchat, that's how they're able to add friends. The Snapchat logo is kind of like a QR code. If you were to pull up Snapchat and take a picture of that, it will give you a link. If you have an iPhone, you pull up your camera and just point the camera at it without taking a picture, it's going to give you a link. If you have an Android and you don't have Snapchat, you would have to download a QR reader, which is just a free app in the App Store. Every classroom will have an iPad as well for students that forget their phone or don't have a phone. And we're going to let you guys right now take the opportunity to pull out your phones and sign up for a class. Pull up your phone, point it at the screen. If you have an iPhone, just go to camera, and you'll see a link. And after you see a link, click it, and it's going to take you to where you'll put in your first name, last name. For the students, when we actually unroll this, they'll have their own QR code that will fill their name in for you then. This is a mock one that you have to type your name in. When they pull out their own, the name field will fill in. There'll be a list of options for them to choose as a destination. When they choose a destination, it will update live in a spreadsheet that can be searchable by any teacher, any staff in the district. Also, while doing this, if, say, there's only 20 spots open in my class that day, it will automatically email me when 20 kids have signed up for my area. At that point, I can go into the form, delete my name from the list, so therefore I don't get a surplus of kids that I don't have the resources for that day. So, and from your angles over there, you may need to be straight on. Each one will have their own right in front of them. But did you guys get to the... When you get there, type in your name and actually fill it out. Actually do it right now. Pretend this is our Eagle time right now. You guys came into Eagle time, and it's time for you to pick where you're going. And we're going to pull up the list in a little bit and see if we can find where you went. How this came about. In my classroom, the old system I had for signing out, students had a planner. 641 kids in the district have a planner. They need to go to the restroom. They would ask, Mr. Henshaw, can I go to the bathroom? At that point, I have to stop. Yes or no? Then they bring their planner to me. I have to stop, pull my pen out. Sometimes they don't fill the time. Sometimes they don't put where they're going. I have to look, and there's time wasted there. When I mocked it out with my wife here, it took 36 seconds, all right, for a traditional sign-up. Doing it this way, I know, you can picture this, me at home. Like and then, so we did with my new system, we were around 13 seconds. And the time saved, if you multiply by 178 days and maybe 100 kids throughout the day sign out, you're around 30 hours of educational time saved just by changing the sign-out system, plus the amount that's saved. And instead of having planners, use a piece of paper, and that covers the kid. So right now you guys have a little bit of time to see who signed out. All right, so there's who signed out. You will see your name on there. Show up live. If I had 641 kids and I didn't want to look through all of that, I can just do a quick search. I can do this on my phone, wherever. So Control F, I want to find Jim Gray. So I'm going to type in Gray. I want to hit enter. At that point, Jim Gray's name's going to highlight, and anyone's the last name Gray. So Jim Gray, did you go to Mr. Urban's? Yep. Is that where he selected? If I need to find Jim Gray, I'd be going to Mr. Urban's room to find Jim Gray. And Jim Gray, you did that on today, December 5th at 10, well, sorry, military time, 7:57. And that's what time he signed out to go there. Melinda Gray, you went to Mr. Andrews, correct? So that's our system right now. It is live. As some of you are doing it now, names are still showing up. And every day, how this would work is we would reset this at, say, 3:30. This list would go away. And now at 3:30, we reset it. And you're a student that knows Mr. Lilly's doing an experiment, and he has 20 openings for that spot. At 3:31, you're on there trying to sign up the day before, so you get a spot at Mr. Lilly's. Just like in college, if you're a freshman, you're trying to sign up for your classes in college. You're up at midnight, right when that goes, trying to get into that class before it fills up. Every day, this would be a new list that would be populated. When 20 students fill up in this class, boom, comes off. And also, we're able to see one last thing here. responses, the percentage of kids that you signed up. It looked like the one that was the most, you know, popular location would have been Mr. Andrews or Mr. Bauer. So that would have been the two locations that would have been the most popular for that day. So that's the system that we have in place right now to find your kids. If you came in, you need to know, where's my child? Well, I'm going to pull my phone, find, what's the last name? Here's where they should be. And at that point, if they're not there, that's when maybe they get walked through lunch and learn to their locations. That's our system.
All right, thank you all again for coming tonight. I hope that you had a lot of takeaways. If you were to Imagine If, I hope that you recognize the amount of detail that has been put to this and some of the work, and above all, the enthusiasm of our staff, and hopefully as you talk to your son or daughter, of enthusiasm from them as well. Like I said, we'll continue to publish some updates. I'll look for that survey and presentation tomorrow, and the presentation will also be online. Thank you all very much. Have a great holiday.